What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Book Binge on the King Crusoe YouTube channel. This is episode 21, and this week we're going to be talking a little bit about books versus their movie or TV adaptations. Now, first off, I just want to get this out of the way again. I woke up probably a half hour ago or something like that, so if my voice is a little bit gravelly, I apologize, but I am going to try to talk in a way so that that's not a problem. A couple months ago, well, at the time of release, it was probably like 3 or 4 months ago, but at the time of recording, it was like a month ago or so, when I posted a question in Mike's Book Reviews Discord for people to fill out a poll questioning whether they choose to read a book first or watch the movie or TV adaptation of said book first if they're interested in one or both. So I did that. I got about 6 responses on that, and then I got 2 direct message responses instead of having the poll filled out. So in total, I got about 8 responses, and the results that I got were actually rather interesting, including some of the reasons for why people do what they do in this subject. And it is quite, not necessarily a hot button issue, but it's definitely a question that is a good one to be asked. Why would some people choose to read the book first or watch the movie first, or what are the reasons for that? And I kind of wanted to know, so I figured I'd do a little bit of a discussion on that. So without further ado, let's just kind of jump into some of these responses. So like I said, I got about 8 responses in total. 4 of these, from what I could surmise, were for reasons for reading the book first, and 4 were for reading or for watching the adaptation first. This was really interesting. To get kind of a half and half response, all things considered, was really interesting to me. So a couple of the big reasons that were specified specifically for reading the book first. One response said, "I want to experience the originally intended story first." And that's absolutely fair enough. I think this is probably the most common reason that people choose to read the book first, or why certain people choose to only read the book and never watch an adaptation. They want to experience that original intention of the story, the way that the author intended, without it being, Hollywoodified or otherwise generally ruined in an adaptation, since a lot of movie adaptations have this kind of rap for being really bad. Another response in this category said, "I generally try to read it first because I don't want the show to influence my reading experience, e.g. how I picture the characters, the setting, etc." And I think this is also one of the most common reasons that people give for this as well. Some people want to be able to imagine things the way that they're going to imagine it first. Some people would prefer the opposite, but it kind of depends on who you are. Many people don't like movie adaptations solely because of the way certain characters or certain settings and certain scenes are pictured and shown in the movie. And completely fair, to be honest. Like, that's a gripe that I've had with some movie adaptations for books that I've loved. One in particular I may discuss just a little bit in another section in this video. But then, of course, we've got a couple responses for reasons to watch the movie first, and specifically the movie first. One of those reasons is that it takes a lot less time and can give a more brief hook into the story's concept. And this makes complete sense. If somebody's not totally, invested in reading a 500-page fantasy novel or something like that, if there's an adaptation, a movie, or even a TV show that can introduce them into that world and what kind of the characters are about and stuff like that, that's a completely reasonable reason to want to watch the adaptation first. To spend a couple hours watching a movie or a few hours watching a TV show, a season of a TV show about that book, that takes a heck of a lot less time than the 10, 15 plus hours to read the book, depending on how long it is. If it's a pretty short book, it's 5-10 hours. If it's longer, then it's longer. But depending on the size of the book, especially, and the length of the movie or TV show, it's definitely reasonable to pick to watch the adaptation because of how quick it is. Another response in this category was that movies as a visual medium give you the actual image to utilize when you read the book, making it easier to imagine characters or locations. This is kind of similar to one of the examples I gave for reading the book first. Some people don't want to have the movie versions of characters or scenes and stuff in their heads when they're reading the book because they want to experience, obviously, what the author originally intended. On the other hand, there's this same argument for movies. Some people have a hard time picturing things, like just depending on personality and certain stuff like that. Some people just don't imagine character faces or settings or stuff like that in very much detail. They just have kind of this vague picture going on in their mind of what's happening, but nothing more specific than that. So if you're somebody who struggles with that kind of imagination, if you've seen a movie or a TV show that has characters and settings and events and certain stuff like that on display in the show, then when you read it in the book, you can see, even if it's just an alteration, you can see that scene or those characters from the book in your head, and it can oftentimes really fill out the story. And then, of course, there were actually a couple reasons for doing either. These were reasons that were given either for one response or the other, but were pretty much exactly the same between people who responded for reading first or watching first. So one response was, if it's a movie I will watch on my own, I'll read the book, then watch the adaptation. So there's one for reading the book first. If it's something my partner wants to watch, I'll usually watch the adaptation first with my partner so that we can both experience it for the first time together. Sometimes I may still read the book first in those circumstances. So this person favors probably reading the story over the adaptation, but depending on what your partner wants to do, or if the partner's interested in the story and they're not a huge reader, then watching the adaptation first for that reason, that's completely valid in my mind. But then another reason that I saw was just kind of two responses that were pretty much exactly the same. One said 99 times out of 100, the other said 98% of the time the book is better. Now the reason that I stuck this here in either or is because some people would prefer to read the book first, because obviously it's better. Some people would prefer to watch the adaptation first, so that they can get an idea of what's happening, and then read the book to, circumvent all of the expectations that they have for the story based on how mediocre or bad the movie maybe was. So then we kind of get into the question of where do I fall, since I'm making this video and I'm kind of talking about this a little bit. What are my opinions on this specific subject? Well, I've got to say, I tend to prefer to watch the adaptation first in most circumstances, although there is a little bit of nuance to that. If I've already read the book, watching the adaptation depends on who made it, and how much I trust the people who made it, basically. If I haven't already read the book, but I want to, and I also want to watch the adaptation, I'll watch the adaptation first, and then I'll read it, for some of those reasons that I outlined above. If I'm only interested in the book, I'll read first, and then I'll decide later on down the line whether I'm interested in bothering with the adaptation. And as such, I will give movie and TV adaptations and stuff like that a try, generally with very low expectations, because I'm just kind of that way. I'm a natural pessimist, so I'm like, well, I'm just going to go into this expecting the worst. A subconscious hope, I guess, to kind of be surprised by it. But if it's a story I really, really love or care about, sometimes I'll just outright refuse to watch it. Like, I just will not go to watch an adaptation because I don't want that stuff to be ruined. And that in and of itself is a reason why I like to watch the adaptations first if I have a choice. Like, if there's a book and a movie that are the same story that I both interested in experiencing, I will watch that first because I don't want to read the book, have it really click with me, and then decide to watch the movie and have it be ruined. Like, I don't want that kind of thing to happen, so I fall on the movie side of the spectrum. But of course, I couldn't go all the way through this video without giving a couple specific examples. One example in particular is a discussion that I was actually having with somebody in that Discord, is that for me, part of the reason why I like watching movie adaptations first is that sometimes doing that can give you an appreciation or an understanding of what the filmmakers or whatever are trying to do without the context of the book. Sometimes it's easier to appreciate what somebody's trying to do with the movie before you've read the book to have kind of that experience tainted. One specific book in this circumstance is the Maze Runner series by James Dashner. I love those movies, but I also absolutely adore the first book in that series. I haven't read any of the others all the way through, but I watched the movies with my dad several years ago, back when the death cure was relatively new. And despite the insane, wild differences between the Maze Runner and its movie adaptation, particularly in the second half, because the first half is actually pretty faithful. I loved those movies. Like, I just really enjoyed them as movies. But when I read The Maze Runner, I was just like, okay, well, I can see why people who really liked the book don't like the movie. For example, one of my old friends, who was my best friend in middle school, he loves all of James Dashner's books a lot, but he hated the Maze Runner movies to a very, very large extent. But I had watched the Maze Runner before I actually read the book. So even though I love both, I can see where that's kind of coming from. And I think most of the reason why I am able to appreciate that movie, like I said, is because I hadn't experienced the book yet. Another specific example is the I Am Number 4 adaptation. That movie, I didn't even bother. This is a specific example of this. I didn't even bother watching that movie because I loved that book so much, and I still love it. Like, that first book in that series is still an all-timer for me. The series is really good in and of itself, but that first book especially, and it's so important to me that I wasn't willing to watch the movie. I read it as part of a required assignment type of stuff in 8th grade. But despite all of this, all of me and all of my classmates pretty much loved the book. It was basically the only time an assigned reading, especially for a fiction book or something like that, was something that everybody enjoyed, but we all loved it. Most of my class watched that movie in class after we were done with the book. I decided to sit out, and I'm glad I did, because everybody said that the movie was awful. Not just a bad adaptation, but that it was a not great movie. Another example is The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, both of which have kind of varying viewpoints on how good of adaptations they are. Everybody loves The Lord of the Rings. Many people love the movies more than the books, but many people love them equally in their own ways. The Hobbit movies are a little bit more mixed, but either way, I watched all 6 of these at different points in my life so long ago, like basically right around 6th through 8th grade or so is when I had watched all these different movies, depending. So this example arguably doesn't count, but I had watched all of those adaptations before reading any of the Lord of the Rings world books. So the images and characters and stuff like that that were in my mind were definitely from the movie, and I think that really helped in my appreciation of reading the books, especially when I fully read Lord of the Rings recently. And then, of course, if you saw the thumbnail, there are a few more examples as well. One that I'm going to show here are these 2 movie adaptations for the Chronicles of Narnia. It's not an unpopular opinion to love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. This is a very good movie. I don't know if I know anybody who didn't like it. Prince Caspian was a lot more mixed, and I don't know the general consensus on Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but I actually love all 3 of them, so that might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion. But because I haven't read any of the books of Narnia, I've only read The Magician's Nephew, which is not one of the ones that has a movie adaptation. I can't really comment on how good of adaptations they are, but I love these movies, and most people say that this is a very good adaptation. I don't know how people feel about this as an adaptation, just that it's a boring movie. I don't know, I'll have to see. A couple very popular examples of this trend are The Shining and Jurassic Park, which are movies that vary fairly wildly from the book source material, but which were still very popular and very good. The Shining's movie adaptation is incredibly popular. Like, it's just part of the cultural zeitgeist at this point, but it's still good despite it being very different from the book. Although Stephen King has famously been on record that he did not like Kubrick's The Shining, that's fine. Most people loved the movie and the book. Jurassic Park is the same thing. The movie is plenty different from the book, but Crichton was involved in the movie adaptation, and it was magical in a lot of ways that made it popular. So both the movie and that book are insanely good, and I can speak to those because I love both of them. And then another example, probably the last example that I'm going to go here, is Pride and Prejudice. This is one where my mom insists that you have to watch this mini-series adaptation before you actually read the book because of certain characters and the way that they're portrayed by the actors, and just the way that some of them speak is so perfect in the book that you hear it in your mind when you're reading the book. Either way, I don't know if I'm actually going to make the time to watch the series before I read the book. It kind of depends, but I probably will since I am interested in it and because my mom insists so much. And by the way, how many of you are recognizing these old VHS things? Man, I'm dating myself here even though I'm not even 21 years old. I was raised like a 90s child, don't judge me. The whole point of this video is to kind of say it really depends. There's not really a whole bit of consistency between whether it's better to watch the movies or read the books first. I mean, just as with a lot of things, it mostly depends on what you personally prefer to do. Let me know, if you're watching this video, what you do and why. Do you like to read the books first and refuse to watch the movies, or do you just watch them later, or do you like to watch the adaptation before you go into the book so that you have an idea of what's going on? Are you more like me, or are you more like what I think the general population is like, preferring the book? Like I've suggested throughout this video, I didn't get a whole lot of responses. It was only 8 in total, but I was surprised to see that the responses for either side were pretty much equal. And depending on how you feel, I would like to see some of the examples that you would like to display, some examples of movie adaptations that you like that most other people don't because you watched it first or something like that. Give some examples if you want to. I would love to kind of see those and read about them. Anyways, I hope you had a lot of fun with this video since it was a little bit different. I had a lot of fun trying to, gather responses and just discussing something a little bit different rather than just being a straight review or reading wrap-up or something like that. So if you want more community-based videos like this, stuff where you can vote on whatever I'm discussing or something like that, shout it out and I can try to organize some more of those because that would be a lot of fun. So that's the end of this video. I'll see you guys next week.